welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another episode of Tech Girl Thursdays. Today I am here with Angelina, and we are going to be talking about her experiences in the tech world. So I'm super excited for our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me on the Zoom call, Angelina. Can you give a short intro about yourself and a bit about your background, interests, and hobbies?
Hi everyone, my name is Angelina. I am based in the Bay Area. I am currently a software engineer at Amazon working in the customer trust and partner support org. I've been a software engineer for about 3 years now, but didn't come from a traditional software engineering or CS background. In my spare time, besides working and learning more about CS, I love playing with my two cats, doing a lot of exercise activities like rock climbing, yoga, pole dancing, and during quarantine, I've been attempting to cook a little bit more.
How did you first get into the tech field? So, like, what led to you now working as a software engineer at Amazon?
So, I guess to give some background, I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, so very much a technical oriented school. So, when I started school, I actually came in as a mechanical engineer, and it was for like very fun reasons. I had like a huge obsession with Transformers and Iron Man at the time, so I was like, okay, this is what I want to do because I just love these movies. And after a year, I realized that it didn't align with my personal values, or I guess my long-term goal, which is to use my skill set to make like social differences in the world and to do a more philanthropic path eventually. So then I decided to switch into a biology degree. And after a few years of that, I realized that like even though it is more closely aligned with what I want to achieve, it's not a passion of mine. But luckily, I went to a polytechnic school, so a lot of my friends around me were in computer engineering or computer science already. And specifically, what got me into CS is I was looking for a part-time job on campus, and my friend recommended me to the IT department because that's where he was working then. So my first language was actually SQL, and it's not even like a full, like a hardcore programming language, even though it is a language. But I remember just like being able to manipulate data and make, I guess, like make actionable changes with just like typing a few lines on your computer was such a novel concept to me. And I thought it was super fascinating and a lot more fun than trying to memorize bio textbooks at the time. So that's kind of what got me into it. And having a network of peers already who were already in the field was really helpful to get that going.
That's like one of the beautiful things about computer science and coding, in my opinion, too. Just like the power that one line of code can have. And
Uh,
it's just so amazing. Like I was like mind blown when I first like learned about that.
Literally technology can change the world, and more specifically like coding can change the world. I think it's phenomenal, and we're like so privileged to live in a time where that can be a career and we're like comfortable doing it.
What was like that transition and like learning period like? So like going from, mechanical engineering to biology to computer science. Like how was that like switch?
I will say, I think it required like a lot of perseverance and faith in my decision. So a little more context. Since I did so many transitions in college, I didn't figure out that I wanted to do computer science until my fourth year of school. And Cal Poly is a quarter system, so I had already done my first quarter of my fourth year, and then realized that I wanted to make the switch. So it was too late to make a full transition, and all I could get was a minor. So I think that was a little daunting to think that I wanted to make a full career change without following like a traditional education route. I think what kind of made me feel better is knowing that CS has a lot of non-traditional backgrounds in it, or the tech industry in general. But yeah, it took a lot of work. I knew that I wanted to graduate with some sort of internship under my belt because at least where I went to school, that was really recommended, and most people in general did graduate with some sort of internship. So I had to leverage like the time left that I had. I ended up doing an extra year for my minor, but doing that extra year, making sure that I could afford it because I was working jobs to afford college, and getting an internship under my belt, all while, you know, making sure that I was not losing hope or making sure that I was in the right direction. So I had a great network of friends who I could lean on, to ask questions, especially if I was feeling lost or like I was losing direction. Um, I had I really leveraged my professors at the time who, um, I think knew a lot more about the industry than I did. And I would recommend really, like, even if you don't feel prepared, going to your career fairs and talking to recruiters because they're the ones who are going to be looking for the candidate at the end of the day. So you need to know what you like. I guess you need to know how to mold yourself, especially if you were like me, who's going in so late in the game.
Do you have like any tips for like talking to recruiters and how to present yourself?
From my experience, I think honesty has always been the best policy. So I was always very transparent that I was coming in late, that I had a minor, but um, alongside transparency and honesty is enthusiasm, right? And this is like, this all has to be genuine here. So, like, genuine enthusiasm for why you're making the role, right? And it is kind of like a Hail Mary when you're doing it so late in the game. So, you need to show them that, you know, you recognize that you're coming from a different background, but you love what you're doing, you love learning, you have great curiosity for the role, and you just want to know how you can be a successful candidate or a competitive candidate. Um, and I also think being able to identify the passion aspect of why you want to work in that field is also pretty, it makes you stand out from the crowd because I think a lot of people go into tech because, you know, XYZ, because of the money, because of the clout, etc. And I think that's all understandable. I think most of us have that aspect in our reasoning, but there needs to be something bigger, to kind of make you stand out from, you know, the MIT grad that's also competing for the same role as you.
Like after college, you've worked at three different companies. So the firm, a startup, and Amazon now as a software engineer. So how have each of those experiences been?
So the first job was very much like a springboard into my full career. So it taught me a lot about the nuances of the tech industry in general, like the lingo, the cadence of work, what to expect, how to communicate with your manager, you know, more of the logistics. The second job was fantastic, but it was also very different because it was very much a startup mentality. So you were wearing so many hats. There were times where I was like very confused about the direction because, you know, as a startup, your bottom line is more important than ever. They just want to make sure that they're surviving and thriving. And working at Amazon has been fantastic so far. So I've been there for about 6 years, and I feel so lucky to be learning from like industry leaders, to be working at a company that is providing, you know, like technology for the world, for the government. But the bar is definitely higher, and there's a lot more stress and like personal expectation as well as like professional expectations at hand. I also joined during COVID, so it's been a little unique to kind of bridge the gap between like team bonding or just those relationships because it's harder to maneuver that online. Uh, but yeah, I've come to realize that the work culture at a company is so much more significant than I expected. When I first joined my first company, I was like, oh, you know, they have great technology, great location. My manager seems fine, and that's about all I care about. But then afterwards, I realized that each role I've been in has had such a different work culture, and it's really like made or broken my my final impressions of the role.
They sound like really cool experiences, but also like very different, like in terms of, I mean, I guess the company itself and
Mhm.
the size and stuff, but
Mhm.
also what you learned from it too. So that's so cool. In terms of the culture, like what's the culture that you like best in a company?
So I think, you know, speaking woman to woman, I've always been very particular about a culture that recognizes diversity and just like celebrates the diversity in the company and tries to encourage that. Um, Not every company has that value at the forefront of its mind, which I think to an extent I understand because, the bottom line is for them to make money, not necessarily for them to follow any social justice standards, even though I think they do go like pretty hand in hand for like company success and having diversity internally. But I think a company that has transparency, honesty, obviously celebrates diversity. Those are like the soft skills that I would love for my culture to have, as well as like maintaining rigorous standards for the technology that you're providing or that you're producing, and making sure that your employees, whether they be in a technical or non-technical field, are always growing. Because again, I think when you're sometimes if you're too focused on your bottom line, you forget that your bottom line is gonna be deprecated in a while in a short amount of time if your engineers or your employees in general are not growing or not staying consistent with the growth of this industry that moves so fast.
I know a lot of people I've talked to have also struggled with is like how to determine some of those qualities like before
Mhm.
entering the job. And I feel like some of them you can kind of like suss it out almost before the job, but like some of them you have to be on the job. So like how do you go about doing that? Like seeing how good like a company's culture is or if it aligns with like your values.
Yeah, that's definitely been something that I've been learning as well, because when I first entered my first job, I was like, oh, I just have to read the website and these are the company values. And the company values say that they value transparency and honesty. And that was about it. But a lot of times it's like better stated than practiced in reality. So something that I've been trying to do more, I guess, more openly is during interviews. And I try to ask it in like a very genuine way, right? Like you're not trying to grill them or anything, because I'm sure the manager can't be held responsible for the entire company culture. Um, but in the very least, a manager can be held accountable for the team culture, which is, its own little micro habitat here. So yeah, ask them very pointed questions, like I guess in terms of transparency or honesty or like team camaraderie. Ask them circumstantial questions. I think that's been best. Like, how would you manage a situation where one of your employees has, or one of the team members has pushed up a code that's like, broken something, or like has caused a Sev 2 ticket? How do you facilitate team bonding? How do you make sure that your team is aligned and getting along well? How does the company have any diversity events? Stuff like that. And I think a lot of times that actually reveals a lot more than you realize. Like if a company has no diversity events, it's like, okay, you guys don't care. It's like easy as that. Um, yeah, and there have been some instances where if I have enough time at the end of the interview, I do kind of ask them, like what's your stance on like diversity hiring programs? And I try to ask it in a very neutral tone just to see how they respond without giving away how I feel about it.
It's always hard to navigate that kind of
Oh, for sure.
conversation.
Sure. You also have to make sure that the interviewer doesn't seem like they would feel uncomfortable having those conversations, because maybe they'd be like, oh, I think that's a conversation for HR, or I don't think I'm allowed to disclose. So yeah, definitely some intuition there as well.
So recently you moved to Amazon, so a
Mhm.
new job. So how was like the transition? So like job switching and like adjusting to, new work and
Mhm.
culture and everything. And during a pandemic too.
I think the pandemic, like speaking quite honestly, I think the pandemic exacerbated any feelings of like imposter syndrome and stress, and not sure if I like was cut out for the job, and not sure if, I was just like a blip in the system and they made a mistake when they were evaluating my ability to code. All of that was like intensified during COVID, especially because when you first like meet your team and you get your first assignments, you're not able to see like the body language or like their full reaction to how you're doing. So yeah, that was a lot for me to get over. But I'm sure, that's not like a foreign concept in the industry. So I remind myself that that's very normal. And maybe feeling like an imposter is not the worst thing, because that just means that you are entering a role that is like way above what you're comfortable with, which it means that you are challenging yourself to grow. That's the narrative that I tell myself at the end of the day. But to kind of mitigate that, I made sure that I knew exactly what I was signing up for so that I didn't feel, like underprepared or overwhelmed with anything as much as I could. So that entailed a lot of communication with my team members and my manager. I made sure to set up like a weekly sync with my manager, kind of like a progress report. In the beginning, I made sure to schedule one-on-ones with every one of my teammates, just so we had some type of like casual repertoire going, before I could kind of establish the trust in my professional setting. Um, and yeah, just at the end of the day, even though it was my third job, I was still nervous. But even with my third job, I've come to realize that every new job you start, there's like a training period. So I was like ready to hit the ground running from day one. But for like the first 2 weeks, it was just like pure training, and you were given so much like just logistic material, like sexual harassment training, or this is how you file for PTO. And I was like, okay, this is less stressful because you're not like thrown out into the wild so quickly. And it's like that for every job.
I guess related to imposter syndrome, I really like that narrative that you were saying. Like, if you feel like that, it's probably a role that you can grow into and learn from. And um, I feel like that's like a really like positive way of looking at it.
When I started at my first role, and this is like a little more of a traumatic story, but kind of what like fostered that more positive thinking aspect for me. When I entered my first role, I was assigned a mentor, and he was my age, but he had like 6 more months of experience, something like that. And I like trusted him a lot because, first job, first role, first mentor, and he was my same age. So I was like, oh, cool, a peer who can relate. 6 months into my job, I think I was like hitting a blocker and I was feeling kind of defeated. So I was having like a one-on-one with him, kind of just complaining. And he decided to tell me, as personal advice, that he didn't think I was cut out for software engineering, and that I should maybe consider a different job, a different role. And he was like, honestly, Angelina, I'm going to be honest here. I think you really only got this job because the company was looking to meet like diversity quotas. And I remember at the time, I was like so heartbroken. I was like, here's like someone who I trust so much and I've been confiding in over all these weeks. And, of course, when I confide, I'm sure he hears all the negative things and all of like my personal failures or struggles in the job, much more than anyone else. So he knows that I'm not ready. He knows I'm an imposter here. Um, so there was like actually a brief time in my life where I took that to heart and I considered switching out, but I'm really happy I didn't. And I think putting a spin on it, and like a positive spin on it, has made a huge difference. And I hope that other women who experience the same type of like demeaning talk from their coworkers or, peers doesn't take it to heart and sees it as a challenge that they can't overcome.
Wow, I'm so sorry that happened.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think it just makes you tougher in the
Yeah.
industry, even though I hate that that's like the way that you have to approach it. From one professional to another. If you're going to provide feedback, I think it should be constructive, and nothing is constructive when you're telling someone to quit their job.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? Um, yeah, I hope that person has like learned from that and has learned to be more respectful and constructive when they associate with their peers, but I don't know. I don't work with him anymore.
Oh, it's just so frustrating, some of the talk that happens in the tech industry. And
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I've thought about, I mean, and someone else can take this idea too, because I don't know if I'll actually act on it. But you know how there are books that are like compilations of like Craigslist weird postings or like weird dating messages that you've seen throughout the years.
Yeah.
They're like just books that you find at like Urban Outfitters. I've thought about like compiling a book of just every like negative conversation or message or like, email that's ever happened to a woman in tech. I think that would like make the industry explode, but I'm so curious to hear, to like read about it.
Yeah. Oh my, that's a really good idea,
Yeah.
actually. That would like that would definitely like spark conversation like right
Yeah.
there, like, oh my God, this happened. And
Maybe I'll do it. Maybe that'll be my 2021 goal.
yes, wait, do it, do it. I support
I think
this
it would like crush
100%.
my heart to read every single conversation, but also like I think like even till this day, not enough people in the industry realize that like negativity towards women or just minorities in tech is so prevalent. Like to this day, I think some of my coworkers or my male friends in tech don't believe that like these conversations happen. They're like, no way, you were probably like 1 out of 1 million. I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
like 1 out of 3. Yeah.
I mean, you kind of already touched on some instances of this, but just like being in a tech role, tech company, like what has your experience been like as a woman in tech?
For a majority of the experience, it's been fine. I think like for the most part, most of my peers in all of my roles have been like very respectful, and have been like very mindful. But there have been instances where you hear like just simply being a woman makes life different. So at my previous role, when I had first joined, I was the only female on the team, which I would also recommend asking during interviews, even though that's like kind of a hard topic. If I could go back now, I would have been like, are there any other girls I would be working with? And then just finding out that you're the only girl on the team kind of like gives some insight into their value system. But yeah, I've definitely just been a part of conversations where I think the guys forget that I'm there, and then they have conversations about diversity or minority stats, and then they kind of like go into the conversation about quotas, and that a lot of women are hired just because they need to fulfill a quota. And I'm like, you guys, I'm right here. Or like when teams go out and hang out after work, and I'll be the only girl there and they want to go to like a sports bar or something. Or at my previous role, when I first joined, I realized that the restroom didn't have like any feminine products. So I had to ask our HR, and it actually took them like 9 months to get us like a package of tampons, which was so weird because I was like, a package of tampons is like $10. Really? I could
Yeah.
afford this, but it's like the principle that you guys are taking 9 months to get this through. And I think they wouldn't have even like followed up with it if I hadn't been bugging them like every month to just put a package of tampons in there. Yeah, so stuff like that, that's like kind of when you realize that things are little different. And I think like even though I try to have the positive self-talk whenever I start feeling the imposter syndrome, sometimes it is hard, especially if I'm getting like a promotion before one of my peers, or I find out that I'm being paid a little better, or that I get to work on a new project and a peer does not. Then I don't know if I'm projecting. I don't know if I'm like reading the situation correctly, but sometimes I do feel like they kind of think, like, oh, she's just getting this leg up because she's a girl, or she's just getting this leg up because this company wants to promote female women in tech, and otherwise I would have really gotten the job instead of her. Um, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, I try really hard to push those thoughts out of my head, because it's like the bottom line of a company is still to make money, and as much as they would like to be nice and promote diversity and put women in powers of or positions of power, if the woman is not performing, then the company's bottom line is affected and that woman would no longer be there. So she is there for a reason, and that's just what I tell myself at the end of the day.
Hiring stories where it's like people think like, oh, you only got that job or that internship because you're a woman or you're like a minority in tech. And no,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not at all. Like you still like have to pass the interviews and everything. You still have to, be the right fit for the company. And
You still
um,
have to perform.
yeah, exactly. You still have to perform. It's not like, oh, you're a woman in tech, oh, you're in automatically. Like, no. You
Yeah.
have to go through every single round of interviews. Like everything is still the same. It's
I think some people think we have a free pass.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would actually say during all of my interview experience, which has been plenty, I've come to realize that like my coming in as a woman sometimes acts against my ability to perform well. Not just like the mental situation where I come in and I'm like already nervous because I'm a woman, but there have been times where I'm in a conversation and the interviewer will ask me like a personal question that I can't relate to because I'm a woman. So I was interviewing for like a video game company, and the interviewer was a guy, and he was like very much like a video game enthusiast, and he was just like trying to have a conversation with me about like the latest games that had just come out and like what I play on and what platform and all that. And it was like, I'm just here to be an engineer. I like video games, but like really I don't play that much. And I felt like he was automatically disappointed, and I feel like he contributed it to me being a woman. He was like, another girl who just wants to enter this, who just wants a job but like can't really play games, and all that stuff. um I came to realize after like so many years of being in this field that it's gotten to a point where I felt like I've had to how do I say this, like suppress my femininity a little bit. Just like kind of lower my voice when I'm talking to an interviewer, or not giggle so much, or not like, I don't know, XYZ. So that's been something that I've been more consciously aware of at this new role. So I'll like make small changes. Like if I'm on a video call with my team and I'm doing a presentation, I'll like try to wear pink. Or in all of my documentation, I like highlight stuff in pink. Just like little little rebellions, but I think it's because I've noticed after 3 years that I've like really tried so hard to suppress like what makes me a girl. Like even just wearing makeup at my job, I wasn't doing that because I didn't want to like look too pretty or stand out too much. And at my old role, I like refused to wear dresses or skirts. Even when it was super hot, I was like, oh, I don't want to come off as too girly. Very frustrating. And I hate that that's like a result of all of this, the, I don't know, the hate that we get just for being our our gender.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of stories like that, and I've felt that too.
Mhm.
Just yeah, like it's almost like trying to fit in, that way you're respected
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
and trying to almost like mold to that um that like company ideals
Mhm.
engineer almost, which is usually, like not a woman.
Yeah, for sure. And like just wearing jeans and a t-shirt and fitting in and not being so girly, which is fine like if that's what you're comfortable with, but I just realized that that was what I was kind of pushing myself into. Um, and going back a little bit to what you said earlier about like the bottom line is just whether or not you can perform or not. At Amazon, I picked up a new role. So I'm actually a project lead, and I've come to realize that like being a leader and kind of like transitioning it to being a manager who's like doing the hiring, being a leader in general is just like it's so much work. You are always stressed about how your team is doing, and not just making sure that they're performing well, but making sure that they can deliver the product that you are ultimately responsible for because you have to deliver. That I really have no interest in hiring someone for anything else other than performing and like producing results. So I mean, I only manage a team of two, three including myself. So I can't imagine how it would be like if I was like a full manager hiring a team of like 15. I'm sure they want nothing to do with someone who can't perform well. So, like again, I don't think gender should even like come into the conversation about whether or not they're hiring just because you're a woman.
What things do you think, in general, like the tech industry, what things need to change in the tech industry, and how can we start like moving towards that? Like what are, in your opinion, what are some like actionable things that can happen?
Well, that's a great question, by the way. I think everyone in tech should think about that. First off, I want to recommend a book if you or no one else has read it yet. Brotopia by Emily Chang, Breaking Up the Boys Club of Silicon Valley. So she like spends uh, the entire length of the book just discussing this topic and like going over all of the background and the history of Silicon Valley and kind of why we have the bro culture today. So I think she addresses a lot of the the question that you're asking, but let me try to condense it into less than like 200 pages of text. Well, first of all, I think everyone in the industry needs to be more mindful that there's not one like homogenous population here. So again, like kind of going back to conversations, right? If all you're talking about as a team is like sports and I don't know, basketball and drinking, I think it's really hard to bring it to like make the entire population feel more comfortable. Especially if I'm a woman and I don't know, if I'm older, right, and I have kids, I don't think those types of conversations happen a lot where people are like talking about kids or talking about I don't know, emotions or I don't know, makeup, for example. And I think it's like kind of taboo to talk about those things, but it's like a very common aspect of the female life. Um, so yeah, making sure that your conversations are more inclusive, making sure that your impression of women is not less than your impression of men. And I'm not too sure how to achieve it besides just telling people to be more mindful. I guess you can have like workshops and showing a lot of statistics about how well women perform as men and like how many college graduates there are for women in tech or women in engineering degrees as there are for men. I've had a lot of these conversations myself with male peers, and I think the best way to get to them is through statistics. Otherwise, you know, when you're just telling them like stories or personal experiences, they're like, yeah, but you're just a one-off. Like that doesn't really happen. Or like, yeah, you might be a good performer, but like I'm pretty sure a lot of women in tech just like kind of weasel their way in. And you're like, no, there are like data points that support this. And conveying to them that there have been so many studies done on how diversity specifically in tech, actually promotes like a better work culture, promotes more productivity, promotes more money, and making sure that like everyone knows that these are scientifically backed studies, not just like, you know, some sort of psychological experiment that's been done. And I think something that like at an individual level can happen uh, is again having more of these conversations where people are aware that this is a problem and people should be more aware that the problem might be coming from them and how they interpret the world or perceive, you know, anything that's different from themselves and not contributing it to just like being a pipeline problem or not enough women enter the field in general. It's like, no, maybe you are the blocker to this and you should be more inclusive. And I bring this up because at one of my jobs, I was talking to my manager and kind of saying it in a lighthearted phrase like, you know, hey, I think it's kind of funny that I'm like the second girl on this team out of like 10 and everyone else is a dude, you know, like since we're still hiring, you know, are there not more women entering the pipeline? And my manager in like the nicest way possible, which kind of confused me, was like, yeah, we're getting women, but I just don't want to lower the bar if they're not going to be good enough just so that we get more women in here. And I was like, I don't know if lowering the bar is how you should see it. I don't know. I think that's like a problem in itself to think that you're lowering the bar to get women in. Maybe you should just be thinking that you're not evaluating them well enough. Um,
No, those are really good points because I think everyone always talks about, you know, inclusiveness and being more diverse, but like what can you actually start doing in order to achieve those? And I think like you kind of outlined them.
I wanted to add one last point, which is what I've tried to be more conscious of on my team. Like my immediate team and my bigger team is celebrating the women on my team more. And I think sometimes it can come off as cheesy. And I'm sure some of the guys on my team are like, oh, it's just because she's a girl who thinks another girl is like cool and she's biased. But I'm like, you know what? Men are biased towards men all the time.
Yeah.
I you know, give a crap if I'm celebrating another woman who's doing well. So I always make sure that if like one of the girls on my team is doing well or she just like delivered something that actually like looks amazing, I will speak up. I'll be like, oh, that was phenomenal. You did such a good job. You know, can you teach me that? Or like, can you give a presentation on it? Making sure that they have more recognition than I think a lot of women experience. Because I think when women perform well in the industry, a lot of people think that they are just meeting the bar because so little was expected of them. Like only failure is expected of them. So when they actually perform, that people are like, oh, cool, she did something, which is surprising in itself. And it's like, no, she did something super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, just recognizing that more.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it kind of emphasizes more like, oh yeah, like women can do that, and kind of normalizing that.
Sure. And especially like when conversations of like promotions and um the next role comes up, I think a lot of times like women are passed on that because from like the year of work that they've done, like the men are celebrated more. Like Josh was able to deliver XYZ, so he should get this promotion. And it's because like over the year, like everyone was celebrating Josh and making sure that it was known that Josh was delivering results. But there's also like Nancy, who is doing the same stuff, and yet no one was saying like, oh, Nancy is doing such a good job. And so like I also think that contributes to why a lot of promotions are passed on women.
Yes. Based on all the work that you've done as a software engineer so far, and what you know about the field, what's your favorite part about being a software engineer? And what would you also say is the hardest part on the flip side?
Yeah, I think my favorite part of being a software engineer kind of touches upon what you said earlier and what we talked about at the beginning, which is how magical it is that you can make like such like large scale differences with like a couple lines of code. I think I think you feel so empowered when you can do that, and all the tools are like literally at the tips of your fingers. There's not a huge learning curve, in my opinion. I think it opens up a lot of doors of opportunity for people as well as the world. And knowing that, like if you tried hard enough and if you are skilled enough or enabled enough, you could make like lasting changes, hopefully lasting better changes for the rest of society. I think, but I think the negative aspect of that is that there's just so much to learn all the time. Technology is always changing, standards are always changing, the world is always changing. That sometimes it can feel like if I'm not constantly reading or constantly learning, like even for a day or two, I'm like already behind. I think I don't know if everyone experiences this or if it's just because I'm in Silicon Valley, but that that feeling of like there's a rat race going on can sometimes be detrimental to like my mental health and just how productive I feel as an engineer. Um, but I try to just focus on like the smaller baby steps and making sure that I'm at least producing in my daily job, let alone falling behind in like the grand scheme of things. Um, and yeah, and I think I've been learning a lot more about social impact of technology and going back to like what I enjoy. I think having learned about like the dramatic social impact of what my work can be providing or doing to society is a great thing, but also can be a little scary to think about because I think sometimes when you are working on these like smaller tasks, you kind of forget the final end goal and how it can really change people, maybe for the worse, but hopefully for the better. But yeah, I also think it's really cool to just be like a woman in tech because already you're breaking, whatever glass ceiling there is just by existing and providing like a role model, being a role model, hopefully for other girls who are trying to get in. I think that in itself is like pretty cool.
What advice would you give to people who are interested in getting into tech?
Really know why you're getting into it. I think burnout is um, a huge possibility when you're getting into tech, especially if you're trying to work for a bigger firm. So really recognizing and reminding yourself why you're doing what you're doing, why you love what you're doing, if you do, making sure that you are more perceptive and aware of your impact in the world and in your workspace. Kind of going back to like the social impact of what you're doing, kind of asking yourself like, is the work that I'm doing like hurting the world, helping the world? Do I care about that? Is my existence in this company hurting my team? Am I being kind to my team? Am I helping this industry grow? Am I making it more exclusive versus inclusive? I think those are like not things that you would think about every day as you're an engineer, but just be more mindful about that. I think makes your work life balance or work experience so much better. Staying informed about the industry, I think, has also made a big difference versus staying in like your little tunnel of just like coding all day every day and not recognizing all the changes that are happening around you and might be happening because of you.
Thank you so much, Angelina, for this amazing, inspiring talk that we just had and for jumping on this Zoom call with me. I absolutely loved talking with you today. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on. And I loved having this conversation. I hope it brings some insight or like some new information to anyone who's watching.
For everyone watching, make sure to connect with Angelina. I'll make sure to link her LinkedIn and YouTube channel in the description below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.
Bye.
Bye.